There is this book from Daisetz. I read this, I don't know how many times. I had this for 30 years. Yeah, more than that. Those page and a half I want to translate because this is the book called Philosophy of Zen, which is kind of a counterintuitive to say anything about the philosophy when we are talking about Zen, because it's more by experiential wisdom to be lived, not to be discussed. But this book is quite interesting, especially for those who are interested. But it's very, very, very difficult. And that's why I still keep reading this to give me some insight or confirm some insight. And with that background, I want to share what this part, just one page actually, is talking about. It's about going beyond the individual or ego. So it's about no self, which is connected to the idea of being in the now and in the state of samadhi. But the title of it is Beyond Self and No Self, the core of Zen teaching. So it starts saying that the Buddhists talk about leave ego alone. The idea of the ego is, from the beginning, is nothing. But since we get attached to it, one after the other, there's some kind of, what's the English word? Bottleneck, or the anchoring in the wrong way, that you get into like a deep into the rice paddy, which is water and muddy soil. And once you get your foot inside, then you cannot move. So they say, leave self or ego. So pointing that, believe that there's no self. And then from there will be naturally act which is pure. And that's the essence of no self idea in Buddhism. Yet, while that may be good by itself to have such no self view, but from that cannot bring out the work which doesn't look for the reward. Mukuyogyo, no reward work. There's no such thing. So that's the point. Daisetz says that no self is still in the realm of the consciousness, still stuck in there, because it doesn't create that work that benefit others without your thinking about it. So the truly core, the real core of the act, religious act or spiritual act, has to go beyond this line. In other words, not to stay in the mind, to think about no self, but you have to go beyond that. So for that, you have to experience consciousness of unconsciousness from your body, meaning not from your mind. This reminds me of the Jung talking about be conscious of unconscious. So he's talking using the word, same word, or I think Jung may have learned from Daisetz or confirm that idea is correct. So consciousness of unconscious, be conscious of unconscious and use it as if you experience and act upon it, not in your thinking. So you have to go beyond the cause and effect thinking process. You have to go through that. And that's where, when there's no cause and effect, there's no reward. You see, that's the reward thing that he was talking about. Typically, we think about the reward, and that's good, and that's our thinking. But he's saying that do the work with no self and not think about the reward. So things happen as if from the heart, that's my word, naturally, as the consciousness of unconscious. The things it's inside of you, which is making us to be alive here and now, in the moment, that can connect to our act without thinking to reward us, to benefit or reward others, but just comes out naturally, and it is in line to the way of the universe, so to speak. So it just happens. So that's where the word is shimuge. Mind doesn't get caught up state. And that's where the passage without being with attachment of cause and effect, use of the conscious, the mind play. So this is, in essence, well, there's a saying that is kind of difficult to translate, but when you raise your head, then you realize there's sun. So this is the residence where we have in the West. So it's kind of like a Zen saying without explanation, and that may puzzle us, but what he's saying is that statement I just said is the way, living without the karma or the cause and effect thinking in the mind, but comes out naturally, and therefore jinen honi, which means nature's way as it is the way of the law of the nature. Jinen is nature. Honi means ho is dharma or the law of universe, and it just manifests. And that's the act of us doing without thinking of the benefit. So I stop here just to momentarily. I talked about Genza Myokoni, not in Zen, but the Shin Buddhism, but after his enlightenment. In Shin Buddhism, they call it Eshin, the mind flip around. In Zen, it's Satori, realization. So when he had that, after all the work that he tried to find what this vow of Amida Buddha, he realized that. And when he realized that, after that time, his life was doing anything which benefit all the living being without him thinking about it. So no self, and not thinking of the reward. It's natural. An example I shared in the video is that he talked with the cow or ox, and the crazy ox can be tamed. He talked with the tree or relate to the fish, so that if the kids are to kill fish, he would save the fish and give kids some sweet stuff, something like that. So his behavior is basically full of compassion without looking for it or thinking about it, but as if to manifest the vow of Amida Buddha, which is helping sentient being to be happy without asking for reward. So that's just the insert of the act without thinking of the benefit. And this guy, Genza, lived about 100 years or more ago, influenced so much of people in Japan, in Myokonin, in Shin Buddhism. He's illiterate, but had a profound impact. And I saw this from the book, or I read it, but also in the YouTube. Unfortunately, it's not in English. But anyway, that's just a little background about the work without seeking for reward. So if we live in our mind, which is basically individuals living without connecting to the root, just living in the mind. You, me, this, that, logic, word, what to do, what's the benefit, I do it, all that. If you just do that, there's no world except related to the economics or political governance of human life and science. There's nothing but that. So no self is to challenge that. Don't just dwell in the mind to play economics, governance, science, but beyond that with the no self. But if you just practice no self, that may not go beyond that. So you have the self and no self, and if you have no self, it may just stay there. So Genza may be beneficial for the world, but that may end there. There's something, well, he's not on his own, so he's influencing others without him thinking of influencing, but being compassionate with the situation. So he's going beyond that, actually, which is living in the path without the mind getting into the way. Yet, typically speaking, if you're living alone and self-justifying about such an idea, and Hinayana, just to meditate in the mountain at the end of it, that nobody notices what's in him, what that it's about. And if you think that is all we may aspire, because that's comfortable, then we may lose the true meaning of us understanding the human life. So be careful about it. So living alone in the mountain, enlightened, should not be necessarily avoided or didn't want it, because it has its own value, so to speak. But in the world like what we got today, and this book is written 70 years ago or so, this part by Daisetz, but still applicable in today's world. But it has some sense of like a refreshment. Yet refreshment may not stay there. The human being wants something more than the refreshment, but something driving us to grow. It's not just asking us to be, but whenever we have the problem related to our self, something beyond the self pop up. And this has to be worked out. But if it's just the individual without such, then there's no way of going beyond. So each one of us is to live on its own. Therefore, Bodhisattva would not kill all the delusions to relate to how people live in the hell, so to speak, with the delusion and confusion and upset and war and no compassion. And that's the point of Bodhisattva, or Mahayana Buddhism. So that's just one page. I really hope that this book, I have many of them, but especially this one is so profound. And I thought, if I can translate, but it's not possible. Eventually, some translation may be done. It's not easy to translate. Each word and the meaning and putting together to make sentence, but there's something beyond, like an individual and beyond individual, mind and beyond the mind, or down below. So it challenges us. That's the foundation, the way of Zen, which is to give us the question. So for those who are willing to accept the challenge and to have the Satori and go beyond, that's the idea of Zen, which may not survive, of course. But over years, it has connected one to the other, lineage they call it. But my hope is that when I study artificial intelligence, or they call artificial superintelligence, we may realize the core laws of universe and relate that, so that we just don't live in the mind but go beyond, for us to progress further and be compassionate without thinking of being compassionate, and naturally behaving like that. Scientifically and probabilistic way of thinking may say that there's always a normal distribution, so there's always extreme enlightened and extreme crazy, and there's people in between. I can see that, because that's the nature's way of how the species is trying to move ahead. Given that, not just the refreshment, but something to anchor ourselves, and even the artificial superintelligence may possibly realize that, then the future of human civilization and its process for evolution hopefully will continue. Tomorrow is New Year's Day. Today is New Year's Eve. I read this book in the middle of the night, and I thought I'll give it a try to translate. Thank you for your patience. May all beings be happy.